Welcome back, everybody. I'm pretty excited about today. I want to try to get the crankshaft installed. But before we do that, a couple of things. The first thing is I want to show my tools and what I'm going to be doing today. Second thing is, before we go for the permanent install, I'm going to perform some measurements using some different things. So, with that being said, let's start. Okay, so what I have today is I have the repair manual. Very important to have because it gives us our specifications. And throughout the process, we're going to be looking at that. So I have the repair manual, and then I have a checklist that I developed for myself to write down certain measurements and what I'm seeing, just to have for record. And then the degreaser in case I need to clean anything. This is Permatex item number 81950. It is a ultra slick engine assembly lube. That's what I'm going to be using for when I do my permanent assembly. This is an angle torque meter, and what this does is on the LS series engine, it gives you a foot-pound reading to begin with, but then it says on your final pass that you do it to 53 degrees, which that as you turn the wrench, if you have it set on 0 and you turn the wrench, it's going to turn the degrees. Then I have my phone on the table. I don't need that. I have a ruler to help me cut the Plastigauge, and this Plastigauge, the reason that I want to use scissors is because you want very clean cuts on the Plastigauge before you put it onto your crankshaft. And there's an example. That's kind of what it looks like. So once that I have the Plastigauge cut, which that's going to kind of be the first thing we go into, then I'm going to start tightening down the bearings and verifying the measurements. And we have a filler gauge because I'm going to check my crankshaft in play. And then this is the socket that fits this. It is a 15 millimeter, and these are the outer main cap top bolts. These are the inner main cap top bolts. And then this is a 13 millimeter socket that fits these bolts. I have an extension just to help me hand tighten it down. I don't want to use any kind of power tools on this because measurement is very important. And then these are the side bolts, and they're going to be a 10 millimeter. Now, one thing that I want to do is, you can kind of see a sealant on it here. These are going from the side, and it's very important that you get sealant on these bolts because you'll have an oil leak if you don't. But another thing to point out is we actually have the main bearing cap bolt set from Elgin, and it's Elgin Industries EHC 1007S. Now, these bolts are the same exact bolts, but these are new. They have not been used before. The reason that I want to put new bolts on the engine for the permanent installs because they're new. The bolts are what is known as torque to yield bolts. As the bolt is being tightened down into the block, as you add torque to it, the metal actually stretches, so the tension on the bolt helps hold it more secure. But to get my initial measurement to make sure that my bearings are within tolerance, I'm going to use, I took the old bolts, cleaned them up, blew any debris off of them. I'm going to use the old bolts because that way when I put in my new bolts, they've only had one torque. I've read in several things that you can torque these bolts up to 3 different times and they're accurate. I'm very confident that these are the original bolts that came in the engine, so I will be torquing them to their second time. But these are going to be the initial. And again, as we had in the last video, I have the main caps, the crank caps and bearings already installed. And then I have a large flathead screwdriver, which is going to allow me to check the crankshaft in play, front and back. Alright, so now that I have shown the tools, let's go ahead and get a measurement on what we need our Plastigauge to be. The Plastigauge is going to go on the crank journals, and this is just a double check. It's only about 7/8 of an inch. That would be good. Another thing to point out is the position that I have the crank in the engine. Notice that at the 12 o'clock position on the very top or bottom of the engine, I don't have any oil journals. If you have oil journals in the way, then it's going to cause a non-accurate reading. Alright, so what I'll do is I'm going to go through the first placement of a Plastigauge, and then we'll kind of speed it up a little bit, and then we'll go to, I'll do one thing once even though it's repetitive, and explain it as I go. So as we said, 7/8 of an inch. It's a very fine material. I don't think I'm going to use the scissors. I think a better thing for this would actually be a razor blade. And I think another thing that I'm going to do is turn off my fan, because I don't want anything blowing onto the engine to blow my Plastigauge off the engine. We're going to go ahead and cut the first one. Again, as I said, 7/8 of an inch. Oops. Okay. So there's one. There's two. And I think we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now what you use on the Plastigauge to measure the tolerance is this area here if you wanted to do inches, this area here if you want to do millimeters. So I want to cut, oh, need my scissors. Now I want to cut a piece of the paper off. So this will be what I'm going to use to measure. So now I want to very carefully place my Plastigauge. I think for this I should use a pair I'll just use my hand. Like I said, just put it right on the top. And again, we're lining it up with this. And we'll repeat down across the engine. Alright, now that we have the Plastigauge in, what I want to do is put my bearing caps in to do the fit process. And remember, they go in a certain way. So here's our number one. And again, everything is dry. No lubricant at this point in time. Double check, make sure there's no dirt or Alright, now that I've set the mounts in place, remember I said that you have inside bolts and outside bolts. These are the inside bolts. The reason that they are different is because this also, once that this bolt's in, you use this part to mount the windage tray, which we'll go into at a later point. So now I just want to finger tighten the inner bolts, and here are the instructions for this, and here is the actual torque sequence that you install the bolts. So it says here we got 1 and 2. This arrow represents the front of the engine. This is the front of the engine. So we have 1 and 2 in the middle. And remember, they're inside. So if we were installing it just like the diagram, it would be 1, 2. And again, it doesn't matter just putting them in by hand, but when you go to torque, you have to follow this sequence. That was my sweet, beautiful daughter going to the gym to work out. I'm gonna try to get her at some point and get her on camera, but we'll see. All right, now I have hand tightened the center bolts in. Now I want to do the outside bolts. Again, I'm just hand tightening, and they are the old bolts because I want to torque them. When I put my new bolts in, I want them to be brand new. The side bolts. Oh, it's not down far enough. Now, the first thing I want to do, it says tighten the inner bolts 1 through 10. First pass, sequence to 15 foot-pounds. Right now, our torque wrench is zeroed out. $14, $15. So here's 15 pounds, and I'm making sure it's going the right way, as it says here. All right, and then we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll come back and check this often. There's my 15 pounds. Let's do number 2. Because we're going to be coming back multiple times, I still need to do my number 1 because that's bolt 9 and 10. I think I'm gonna number them and take a picture. use this adapter, and what this adapter is for is to take my 1/4 inch drive to adapt my torque wrench to a 1/2 inch. Because the angle gauge is a 1/2 inch. So this mechanism, it comes out, but this helps you to position your angle meter, and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so on the inside bolts it says tighten the inner bolts first pass to 15 foot-pounds. Then it says tighten the inner bolts a final pass in sequence 80 degrees using that special tool number. As per the manual, I think that's like a GM specific tool. But again, follow the order. Anytime we're tightening anything, follow this order. And actually, I don't think I have to use this because I'm just doing degrees. So good. I want to correct myself. I do not need this because I'm just doing degrees. It doesn't matter the actual torque. So disregard that, but that is really cool because I want everyone to see that I make mistakes constantly, but what's important is you read and you're able to go back and correct yourself before you get to a point where you know you don't where you've over torqued something. But I'm glad that happened. Now we are going to need a larger 13 millimeter for the 1/2 inch drive. So I want to put my 13 inch here, and then I want to set it up. But again, remember the order. And if you've noticed, I took a Sharpie just to remind myself the number and the torque sequence. So here's our first one. Alright, so for me to get a good angle, I'm going to want the long end down. I'm going to tighten it. I'm going to go to position 1. And I want to move my meter to where it feels like it'll hold. Then I'm going to move my gauge to 0. And I want to double check again. Pretty sure it said 80 degrees. 80 degrees. So now I'm doing 80 degrees. As I turn the wrench, you'll see this turn to 80. Now the next step says tighten the outer bolts 11 through 20 to 15 foot-pounds. That's the same measurement that we had in the beginning. So we're going to do 15 foot-pounds on the outer bolts. Notice how they're numbered. So they start at number 11, which is right here. Oh, got to change my socket. Okay, now I have to get a 15, and we're going to repeat the same process. But this time, instead of going to 80 degrees, we'll only go to 53. And again, that's going to be about right there. Start with number 11. I want to try deep well because I don't like the way the shallow well was filling. We were on number 15. The angles are set properly, the torque. Now we're going to move into our side bolts. Then it says after we did the 53 degrees, we do 18 foot-pounds on each of the bearing cap bolts. Tighten the bolt on one side of the bearing cap and then tighten the bolt on the opposite side. So we'll start with the back and work our way front. That fits a lot better this time, huh? But just for now is hand tightened, so that's why I'm not going in the pattern. Alright, now we just basically do the reverse of that and we do our measurement. So that was a good day for this. I mean, awesome. I had some problems with my tools, which is awesome. It shows how to kind of navigate around it. I feel very comfortable that it's installed correctly and I'll get the appropriate readings. But that's it for this video. The next video, I'm going to wait and we'll remove exactly opposite, measure our bearing gaps, then we'll clean the material off the Plastigauge. Once that's off, I'll remove the crank. And, well, before we do that, I'm going to check what's called the crankshaft runout play, or let me double check that. The crankshaft in play, and we will measure the in play at the main bearing housing. Thanks again. I want to give a shout out to Poppy Larry. I hope you're watching. If you are, let me know. I appreciate everything, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Thank you.